There's never been a time that I've not been a nurse. So I remember doing the 11 plus and failing, actually. And of course, my brother, did he pass or fail? He passed.
Yeah, of course he passed.
Everything was discussed openly. So birth, death, sex, it just was. I knew how to care for people. And when we dive into palliative care, it's actually fantastic care. It's the most holistic form of care you can give. And I remember somebody dying. And I wasn't there. That person died alone. And I knew that was wrong. I also remember seeing somebody sit closer than we are now in this busy, frenetic atmosphere. I remember seeing her just sitting and the impact that had on me, that she could take time out and just be. Our bodies know what to do. Our bodies know how to have a baby. Our bodies know how to die. So I remember going to a hospice, and it, potentially a bit corny, but it did feel like coming home. People were too scared to tell families and relatives that their loved one was sick enough to die. I've seen so many people die and had the huge privilege of seeing so many people die as well. And it's very hard to think that there isn't more to a person than this. I don't have a faith as such. But there is. I have a spirituality. I do have a spirituality, and I think there is more than just these cells that make us up. Where that goes, what happens to that, what is the essence of you, I don't know. But I hope we live on somehow.
Thank you so much, Clare Fuller, for making the trip out here today. We are so appreciative of your time, and we're just super excited to have you on the podcast. So, without further ado, we have our very first question, which is, tell us about this lovely photo of yourself.
Well, that's a bit bold, calling it lovely, Hannah, but thank you. Do you want me to grab it?
Yeah, take it down for us.
Okay. So this is me. Have you had a look at it? Do you want me to share it with you?
So why don't you have a little explanation of what we're looking at here, and then we'll show the audience.
Okay, I think that's a really good way of doing it, because it needs an explanation before we have a look, I think. So this is me aged 14, 15, and it's actually made me realise it's quite emotional for me to look at it. So this was following a riding accident. I wasn't riding as such, I was trying to capture my horse. So I was on my own in a field and have no memory of what happened. So my memory is wearing white joppers, if you wear when you're riding, and looking down, and my joppers were red.
Oh my God.
Oh, this is a bit odd, seeing red jods. Maybe that's my blood.
Yeah.
So I had no memory, and I had to get up on my own, open a gate and cross a road. And I remember a car going past, Hannah. And I thought, well, if I'm hurt, that car would probably stop. But it didn't. So I thought, well, maybe I'm just exaggerating this bit of blood.
Yeah.
So I got up, I opened a gate, I crossed a road, I locked the gate, and I went back to the house of the people that owned the horse. And then, of course, you can imagine somebody's reaction when she looked. She said, oh, my goodness. And at that point, it started hurting.
Oh, my God.
And I thought, perhaps I have hurt myself. So I was taken initially to a local hospital, and I had such catastrophic injury that they couldn't do anything with it.
Oh, my God. So
I'd broken my nose, my cheekbone, the palate, the roof of your mouth, and my jaw as well. So I remember vividly my dad lifting me and scooping me into hospital. And then I got transferred. You might have heard of East Grinstead Hospital, which isn't too far from here, is it? And where they do plastic surgery, they'd obviously done their fantastic work during the war. So I went to the children's plastics ward at East Grinstead and had the most incredible care. So they wired my jaws together. I actually woke up and they'd stapled my tongue to the wire inside. So
oh my God.
That was a bit scary. So I had to get a pen and paper and write. You've wired my tongue in to the wires, so they had to sort of poke it out. So this picture is taken when I looked quite good, believe it or not. I think it's after the operation when the swelling had gone down. And so many memories about that experience that I hadn't realised that I still hold so much until I'd looked at it. So many things. Things like there were no mirrors in the hospital.
Was that purposeful?
Purposeful. So I remember going to the bathroom and there were no mirrors, so I couldn't see. And it wasn't until I had an X-ray And you don't realise the X-ray machines are shiny. So I caught sight of myself in the X-ray machine, and that was really scary.
And what did you think when you saw yourself?
I think I was worried for everybody else as well. We were a really tight family, and I was worried. I scared myself. I thought, I look really scary for me. What must it be like for my mum and dad to see me? I think I never thought I'd look okay ever again, because my face came out at right angles.
Oh my God.
And it's a bit interesting. We were talking before you hit record as well, and it lives with me to this day. So this side remains numb. So I feel slightly uncomfortable being looked at from this way around. So yeah, it's had a big impact on me. Big impact.
Yeah, it's interesting. Listeners, we'll bring you behind the scenes a little bit, as long as you're comfortable sharing this.
Absolutely.
We kind of had a conversation beforehand debating on what side Claire would be comfortable sitting on. And I just want to say that as much as I would have been fine switching sides, I think it's really honorable that you made the decision to kind of face your fears with that, because I think specifically with this podcast, I will be facing some of my fears as well, considering we're going to be speaking so much about death and end of life care, that I think it's going to be an episode of facing our fears for sure. Did you ever get back on a horse?
That's a great question. Yes and no. So some years down the line, I'd read a book called Horseboy about a gentleman that his name was Rupert, and his son was autistic, and he had set up a camp because he found out that by being on horseback, it generated a lot of activity in the boy. He became verbal.
Oh wow!
And I think he was an American or a Canadian guy, and I heard that he was coming to the UK. So I thought, I can ride.
Yeah.
I'm a nurse. I've got experience of autism in my family. I thought, I can do this. I can help. So I went to Bodmin Moor with a tent, as you do, one crazy weekend, and spent a weekend at the camp. It was really interesting seeing the horses interact with the children. And the emotion they picked up through the children, it was incredible. And at the end of the camp, as a treat, I was allowed to ride back to the stables, take the horses back.
Oh my gosh!
And I was crap.
Yeah.
And I realised that I'm actually still scared, which makes me really cross. And the horse knew that I was scared, and I think the horse had also been working so hard with the children all week that it absorbed all their feelings and all the emotions and all the stress, maybe. So yes, I did get back on a horse, and I wasn't a great rider, but it's something that I want to do. I want to do again. Each time I see the fields cut in the summer, I remember riding across the fields, cantering across the stubble when they cut all the corn. So yeah. So yes and no. I have got back on a horse, but not brilliantly well.
And do you still hold that fear?
A mindfulness. I'm mindful of the animals because I didn't fall off. So I'm mindful of their strength. So it's a really unusual injury. So what we think happened was that the horse wheeled around, reared up, and his face simply smashed into my face.
Oh my
so
God.
I think I'm mindful of the strength.
Yeah.
The strength of them. It wasn't simply falling off. It was we think that's type of accident, because there were no cuts. It was all simply breaks.
Oh, that's a really scary story. I don't know what else to say there, but that's a very scary story. And yeah, it's interesting how something from your childhood can still impact you today, and especially at such a formative age that you were. It would be a difficult thing to overcome, but yeah, thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
We'll just pop this picture back onto the wall.
Would you like me to do it?
Yes, that'd be fabulous. Thank you.
Oh, there's a test to see if you can get it properly on.
You'll be great. Oh.
There we go.
Perfect. You obviously had a great love for horses. Was that kind of your dream career? Did you have any sort of aspirations as a young child? Bring me through that.
No, I think it was probably stereotypical. So career-wise, I just enjoyed doing it. I was never going to be a horseman. I'm not a massive sports fanatic, but I used to love watching show jumping, riding. So from a really young age, I used to muck out stables.
Oh, nice.
And get paid I'm only going to tell you how little I got paid
No,
for mucking
tell
out.
us. Tell us.
I think it was 50p a stable. Can
Oh
you
my
believe?
God. And how long would it take you to clean the stable?
Too long. Hard, smelly, dirty work. But as a treat for that, I was allowed to ride as well. So you basically worked for riding. It was a really small, it was just a lady. It wasn't a big stable. It was just a private area. So I didn't ever aspire to be a horsewoman or to make that a career. It was something that I really enjoyed. My mum and dad would drop me off. And again, it seems strange now with the little fold-up bike.
Oh, okay. You had a fold-up bike.
I had a fold-up bike.
That was a thing back then.
It was a thing back then.
Oh, look at
Yeah.
that. Not saying
Back
that you
then.
were. Not saying that you were. It was
They're
a long
not
time
new.
ago.
They're not new. So I had a little tiny car. We had a little fold-up bike. So they'd drop me off quite a few miles from home, quite a young age.
Yeah.
I'd muck out the stables, ride on my own,
Wow.
and then cycle home through the lanes on my own. So yeah, quite a bold.
How old were you, do you think?
I had the accident at 14, 15, and I was doing that work for a good few years before. So 11 upwards. It seems strange perhaps now saying, but yeah.
That's really cool though. So you had that kind of work ethic from a very young age.
Yeah, you have to work. You work for what you get.
Absolutely.
If I want to ride, we didn't have pots and bundles of money, so I had to earn it. I had to work for that joy of riding.
Amazing. And did you grow up with siblings?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I have one fabulous brother who is 22 months younger than me. So my baby brother.
Nice. And were you close growing up?
No.
No. I know. It's the same with my brother. It's like we're just starting to like each other if my parents aren't around. Otherwise, it's cats and dogs.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that because I could come up with a quick fire no. And then you've got to say, are you okay now? We weren't close growing up because we were so different. He was so passive.
Yeah.
And so smooth and so easygoing. And I'm fiery and feisty and angry and Scorpio. And I think it was when we got to our teens that I realised actually he was quite naughty too. He was just far better at being quieter about it.
That was how my brother and I were.
Yeah.
And I would be always the one to get in trouble because I was louder.
Exactly.
And I'm like, he started it.
He started it. It's his fault. So when we could start covering for each other,
The bond grew a little.
the bond grew a little. And I realised how much you're going to touch on really close nerves this podcast, Hannah. But we are so close now.
That's lovely.
He our family and my brother, absolutely everything. So no, we weren't. We fought like cat and dog. Come teenage years, it sounds very similar to you. We are. We're a really tight unit now.
That's beautiful. And so obviously you became a nurse later in your life, but before we explore those years of schooling and that sort of stuff, tell me, what were you like as a child? Were you, obviously we know that you were feisty and wild and this fiery child, but was there parts of you that were caring and had those kind of attributes that you'd find in the medical unit or medical care?
I'm trying to think the words there. I know we're going to pull this apart a little bit more, but I would say absolutely yes. It is so innate in me. And I think to care, you've also got to be brave and feisty as well. 100%. Because you're sticking up for people that often don't have a voice. But there's never been a time, I'm not going to preempt your question, but there's never been a time that I've not been a nurse, if that makes sense.
And what do you mean by that?
That, can I call it a nurturing element? That need, desire, want, drive to care for other people. And I hope that doesn't sound naff.
No.
But it's just such a drive. It's just an innate desire to look after other people. Not to disable other people, but to get the best from them. So I don't wish to sound that, people need looking after and it's only me that can do it. But if somebody needs help, I'd like to think I can provide it. And even if that's helping them get back on their feet again or something like that. But brave, feisty, caring, those attributes I think have always, I hope, always been there.
And do you think as a young child and perhaps going into your teenage years, did you put others before yourself?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Yes and no. To answer that, if I always did that, then I would be completely selfless. But I know that I'm also selfish at times as well. So I can't answer, yeah, of course I always do. Because to a degree is probably the most honest answer I can give for that one.
Fabulous. And take me through your schooling years. So, you know, as a young child, were you super studious? And how did your parents kind of perceive schooling at that time?
Yeah. So I went to a normal primary school, a mixed primary school. Super studious, yes, I guess I was. I was a bit of a goody two-shoes, a bit of a pleaser. I liked to, I'd hand my homework in on time, that sort of student. I remember vividly hating my first primary school teacher. She was really scary.
What made her scary?
She was really strict, really, really strict. And I still remember crying on the way to school, not wanting to be separated from my mum, really as a vivid memory still. And then I got a teacher who was so much softer, so much gentler, and it was fantastic. And from my memory, lots of people didn't get on with this scary teacher.
Yeah.
It wasn't just me. So yes, I was studious. I went to a local primary school, so it was great. We could walk. There was no buses. Fantastic. We had the 11 plus. We have the 11 plus system where I grew up.
And what is that?
So the 11 plus is a selective exam that you take at the end of primary school. If you pass the 11 plus, you get onto what's called a grammar school.
Okay.
It's not available all across the UK. There are some areas that do it and some areas that don't.
Okay.
So basically, for the bright children, you go on to grammar school.
Gotcha.
If you fail the 11 plus, and, note the words that you use, you pass or you fail, you go to a comprehensive school for everybody. So I remember doing the 11 plus and failing, actually.
Wow.
I failed the 11 plus. So I'm going to be really proud to talk about the things that I have done since then.
Yeah.
But I failed the 11 plus, so I didn't get to go to grammar school, which would be the selective stream. So for what were considered to be brighter children.
And was the assumption that people went to grammar school, they'd go on to university, and the comprehension school, they wouldn't?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And of course, my brother, did he pass or fail? He passed.
Yeah, of course he passed.
Of course he passed.
Of course he passed.
Of course he passed.
Oh.
So I went to the local comp, which was a great school, a huge school, modern blocky school. And I worked hard. I did okay. And then at the age of 16, there were lots of teacher strikes at that time in England, a huge amount of strikes. And at 16, you make a choice to do your A-levels.
Okay.
And I remember thinking there's no point staying on in a school to do A-levels if the teachers are missing most of the time. So at 16, I then went on to grammar school because I'd had achieved so much GCSEs or O-levels, as they were called then, so that I was able to get to grammar school.
Oh, okay.
So I did my final 2 years at a grammar, a girls' grammar. Oh my goodness, the girls were snobby.
Oh, I would imagine. Going to an all-girls school, I think would be very intense.
Yeah. And coming from the comp as well, so we went from comprehensive to a grammar as well.
Was it a significant difference?
Yeah. It was an interesting experience. Interesting experience. But I got what I needed to do. So I got my 10 GCSEs, my 3 A's, and I had always known that I was going to be a nurse. I knew what I had to achieve. I knew what I had to do. And I got everything I needed to go where I wanted to go.
And what did your parents do?
So my mum did lots and lots of different jobs. My mum is mum and dad are both incredible in completely different ways. So mum, she was predominantly our mum, I would say.
Yes.
But she worked all different jobs to fit around looking after us. She worked in libraries, she worked in doctors' surgeries. My earliest memories of my mum are making things.
Yeah.
She would make suede to sell.
Oh, wow.
Lace making, bobbin making, decoupage, everything. She is so clever. I remember being really grown up.
Yeah.
And she was still shortening me. She still does. She still shortens my clothes because I'm useless at anything like that.
Oh my gosh.
Fantastic.
That's so sweet.
And to give you an idea now, she's in the past few years of her life, and she won't mind me saying she's 78.
Yeah.
She's learnt Greek.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she's fluent. Mum, you are fantastic. So she thought, we
Wow.
go to Greece an awful lot. It's our special place.
Yeah.
So she thought, I'll learn Greek.
That's amazing.
So she is the most incredible. And Mum went to little grammar school, actually. It was really unusual that generation ago.
Yeah.
Not from a wealthy family at all. And she was very, 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 very good student.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mum incredible. So lots of different jobs that she did throughout our childhood as well. Dad was an engineer. He'd call himself a fitter and a turner. So he created machinery. He sometimes travelled with that as well. So he worked locally as a fitter and turner. Dad's passion, very much nature. And that's come through in my children now, which is lovely.
That's
so
wonderful.
My dad can identify bird songs, he can identify nature, animals, and has that love and passion. So Mum and Dad, really different people, but a really good combo.
That's amazing. Well, it sounds like you had a very happy childhood. Yeah. Do you think you would describe it that way?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a blessing to say that, I guess, isn't it?
It is. And I think through reflection, you can only really determine that. Because I'm sure as a child, you're like, Mom won't let me do this. Dad won't let me do this.
Yeah.
But upon reflection, it's lovely that you can say that is the case
100%,
for yourself.
100%. I needed to get out at 18. I needed to be gone.
Yes.
That's fine. But I would say my childhood, really close, really tight. I've got family in Germany as well. My gran lived next door to us.
Oh, lovely.
And all of us used to congregate in the summer holidays. And the second cousins are close, and now the third cousins are still close as well. So, yeah, we're a tight bunch.
That's amazing. And so bring me to, you've just transferred to your grammar school. You're finishing up your GCSEs. And apologies, sometimes my knowledge of the UK school system is not ideal. So, please forgive me for that one. But you're finishing up your GCSEs. What's next? What are the next steps?
So throughout school, you had what was called careers advice.
Okay.
I don't know if people still do. If other guests have mentioned as well, but you had careers advice. So you'd go and see a careers advisor about what you wanted to do. And I used to sit there and think, well, it's just, I'm a nurse.
Yeah.
I am a nurse.
That's the only option.
That's the only option. So there was never, lots of people go through that angst and that thinking. That I'd always known. We spoke before recording as well about a photo I've got of years ago, which I've lost somewhere in my house, about me being in a nurse's uniform.
And what age were you at?
4 or 5.
4 or 5. So it's always been...
Yeah.
It's always been what you've meant to do.
Meant to do is a good word. Not wanted to do. It
just has been...
It just is.
It's who you are.
It's who I am. It's my identity. So come at the age of 18, the next step was then, well, where am I going to do my training? So I know what I'm going to do, but where am I going to do it? And I suppose another thing about my character is I always want to be the best that I can. So I thought, well, where's the best place that I can do it? I want to go to one of the London teaching hospitals. If I'm going to train to be a nurse, I want a name that will command respect and make me feel sit up tall and think I train there.
Exactly.
So I applied to all the big names, all the big London teaching hospitals. I got the interviews. I King's, Guy's, all different ones. And the one that I felt most comfortable at was Guy's Hospital near London Bridge. So I'd done my application. So by the time I'd done my A-levels, the final exams that you do, I knew that I was going to leave school in, August time, July time. And then I was going to start my nurse training in September.
And how old were you?
18.
18.
I can't believe I'm saying that.
Gosh.
Nearly 19.
That's crazy.
So you're flung into a world, and I find that crazy now.
Yeah.
You're flung into a world, and the training was different as well. So you started by doing a period in I won't say university, it wasn't, a period in nurse education for say 6 weeks, and then you'd go on the ward. So you imagine being 18, 19.
Oh my gosh.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
Bash. You've got a uniform on. You're out there.
And what were you expected to do in that first kind of...
Oh.
Like, were you given a lot of responsibility?
In hindsight, yeah.
Yeah.
A terrifying amount of responsibility. I'd done care work. So I've done lots of jobs as I was growing up as well for money. So I'd had worked in a care home for older people. So I'd had experience at least of care. I think I was 14 when somebody said a resident had died.
Wow.
And they said, "You're going to be a nurse. Come and help us." I thought,
Oh my gosh.
But you are thrust into an environment at a very, very young age. You're performing intimate care for people. You're dealing with life and death. You're dealing with human emotions at an age when you're still forming your own emotions and you're still growing as a person. So it's tough. It was a tough training.
And I'm just wondering about the whole death thing, because being involved in that at the age of 14, like when you were growing up, how was death discussed in your family? Was it, I'm wondering how it was discussed.
I can't pull a memory and say this is how it was discussed, but I can just reflect on our family. So everything was discussed openly. So birth, death, sex, it just was.
That's amazing.
So it's just part of life.
Yeah.
And I know other families where things are buried under the carpet, where things aren't discussed, and it's more difficult. But I think it's just part of life. Maybe my dad's the nature, the circle of life. It wasn't something that I remember standing out as a conversation ever. It just is.
It just was.
Just was.
It just was. And did you ever have a fear of it?
Not overtly, no.
No.
Not overtly.
Man, I remember growing up and my mom, I was like 9 years old, I think, and she told me that her dad had passed away. And like, I now know that I suffer with obsessive compulsive disorder, but back then, had no idea. And I refused to say the word death. That's because I was like, something would happen if I said it. So I would say, my grandfather kaput. And that's all I would say. And it was weird. Like every month I would get this strange dream that would cause me to go into like such a panic over like what is out there and like what comes next. And even sometimes like to this day at 25, almost 26, I still get into those like the heart starts pumping and you get all like flushed. And yeah, it's interesting. I'll be curious to know how you've dealt with that over your life. But going back to obviously your first year learning how to be a nurse and all that sort of stuff, do you have any stories that particularly pop out to you?
I have so many stories. I've just got to filter about what I can talk about and share.
Well, we love it all.
Let me think. I'm thinking about stories that I can share. I remember my paediatric experience. I remember looking after children, and I was working at Guy's. And because it was such a specialist hospital, it actually had its downside as well. So,
and what do you mean by specialist hospital?
Well, so we would have paediatric intensive care. We had the most sick, actually cardiothoracic, so children with heart defects.
Okay.
So if you trained in a non-specialist hospital, you'd get to grips with tonsillitis, with children with broken legs, broken arms, everyday childhood diseases. But I had less experience of that.
Okay.
And I had experience of incredibly sick, tiny children with cardiac problems as well. So I remember the huge responsibility of that as well. So that 6-week placement was fabulously interesting, but really, really scary. A patient, I can share a patient that, I'm not going to obviously share names, but I will share a story of a patient that I met. As again, with student nurse, you'd have 6 weeks in placement and 6 weeks, 6 weeks learning, 6 weeks placement. So you have quite a long time on a ward. And I remember meeting this incredible man that had been what they call degloved.
Okay. So
that means he'd had an accident where so much of his skin had been, if you imagine peeling off a sock.
Oh, God.
So peeling off. So a really horrific injury. And we just absolutely clicked. We clicked and we bonded. And give me a pretend name so I don't...
Jeff.
Let's call him Jeff. So I said, okay, Jeff. I said, by the end of my placement, and we both knew that it was time-bound, it was a 6-week placement. we're going to walk down the ward together. You and me are going to walk down that ward. And he went from being this catastrophic, this horrendous injury, and cared for him. And he did, and at the end of the 6-week placement, we walked together. And that will always stay with me, moments like that. And we ended up, every now and then I'd get Christmas cards from him for much of his life as well.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, things like that. Some stories I can't share because
of course.
they're too identifiable and they're too... It's almost not fair. So some of the things that you see are some of the things that bodies do, I almost... It's difficult to share them because they're hard.
And I think from someone who doesn't work in the medical field, it can be hard to imagine that is what you come into contact with every day. Specifically, if your first experience was working in such an acute medical environment, I think even for someone who is looking to go down the medical path right now, it could be such a different experience than the one you've had.
Absolutely.
So it's very interesting to hear. And like you made such an impact on that man, on Jeff. He was able to like achieve that goal. And I think it's, I don't have any other words, and I think it's quite amazing. So you're finishing up school. Tell me, how long did this program take for you to become like an official nurse?
Yeah. It takes 3 years, or it took 3 years then.
And is it that 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off?
6 weeks on, 6 weeks off. And it'd be interesting for people listening because it was just before what was called P2K or Project 2000.
Okay.
So I think I was around about the last batch of nurses to go through that traditional training.
Okay.
And then after P2K was introduced, Project 2000, and people would go to university. So it was a completely different training experience.
Interesting.
It was hard for me. I'm going to really be open. And it was hard for me because I felt I'd missed out. So I'd failed my 11 plus and I'd just missed out on the degree training. So it felt really tough. I always felt like I was a step behind. Maybe not quite good enough as well. Because new nurses were coming through with degrees.
And were you given different titles depending on which one you went through?
No. So when I trained... there was a separate nursing route that people could do, a state enrolled nurse, as opposed to a state registered nurse. So I did the 3-year training. Okay. But no, so people going through the university would go through the same training but come out with a BSc.
I see.
As well.
I see. So do you think that they had a one-up on you in terms of hiring? Because from the way I see it, you had so much more hands-on experience in them.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm sure we'll talk about it later on, but I eventually went on to do my MSc. So I went through an education then. So nursing is about so much more than about care and caring. So doing the BSc route does teach you about the academia as well. It teaches you about evidence-based practice. But the Guy's was actually quite ahead of its time when I was training. So we were very conscious about best practice, what we were doing, why we were doing it, what the evidence was for it. We had... one of our tutors was gay as well, which we're going back to 1987. Yeah. We were on the cusp of AIDS, the HIV epidemic as well. So it was really ahead of its time. So there's two arguments. So it's too comfortable to say it was good then because we were kind and caring. But nursing is far more about it's not just about being kind and caring. It's about giving the best practice. It's about evidence-based. So I think you need a merger of the two. And I'm not going to say this is right or this is wrong. It's about a combination of having evidence-based, but that care and compassion as well.
And has the path that you took been eradicated completely?
Yeah, so if you want to be a nurse now, you might have to fact check this for me, do a bit of fact checking. But you go to uni now. So and also the big difference is I was paid.
Oh, okay.
So I got a salary.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah. So I got paid, and I'm going to tell you.
Oh, how much were you paid?
I've got it. My first pay slip was £246 a month.
Oh, wow. That is... how did you live?
It was difficulty.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, it was shocking. So shockingly terrible. But we were getting educated. Our nurses' accommodation wasn't much. But you did get a small salary, and you didn't get into debt.
It's interesting that even though you had, from like my perspective, this amazing situation in school, you still felt lesser than the people that got their degree.
Yeah, because then years down the line, you'd be starting to think about your career. Mm-hmm. It hasn't held me up, mm-hmm. but you'd just be mindful mm-hmm. that I haven't got my degree, and I missed out on that by a year or two. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't think I was a worse nurse because of it, mm-hmm. but maybe that's because I've sought information, I've tried, and I've learned all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I did feel not that not good enough in some ways.
Yeah. And I think that's a feeling that a lot of people can relate with, especially, I'm not sure how it is in Canada, but there's like the RN route or like just the nursing route, and there's, I know very little about it, but I'm assuming that there would be some feelings of perhaps inadequacy depending on which route you take. And it's funny, like even just going through any sort of university, like even though you've made it to that stage of post-secondary, you can still feel not good enough. Like you literally made it to the place that you want to be and you're still like not good enough.
There's always somewhere else to go.
There's always somewhere else to go. And it's like, I think that's almost like a difference between men and women as well, because up until now, we've only had men on the show just because of scheduling and such things. And I just like reflecting briefly, I almost feel like the failure wasn't as acute for them. And I'm wondering, like, what was your ratio of men to women when you were in nursing school?
Guess.
One, like, very low men. Very, very low men. Like, no men.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I can't remember how many were in our set. I should say around about 30.
Okay.
One.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I wonder how they felt going through that.
Lucky.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, he probably would have gotten a job right away.
Yeah, no, there was one. And society still does it to a degree. But certainly 1987 to when I trained, 3-year training, you were still calling people male nurse.
That's crazy.
Not nurse.
Male nurse.
Or a male midwife, male nurse.
Wow. And you're just nurse.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's wild to think about. And so for nursing, did you, because obviously you went down the palliative care route of nursing, and we'll discuss that more as we continue on, but how did you choose that? How did that come about? When was the first time you encountered that? Maybe start there. When was the first time you encountered palliative care?
I hadn't really thought about it, and it wasn't a medical specialty. It took a long while to become a medical specialty, so I was never specifically taught this is palliative care when I was training.
Okay.
I knew how to care for people, and when we dive into palliative care, it's actually fantastic care. It's the most holistic form of care you can give, caring for somebody, their mind, body, soul, spirit, their family, everything. I do remember being on a haematology ward, looking after people with blood problems, and being so busy, Hannah, so busy. We think it's bad now. It was bad back then as well.
Yeah.
You're running for equipment, running to get stuff, being in charge. And I remember somebody dying, and I wasn't there. That person died alone, and I knew that was wrong. That's not right. That shouldn't happen. That's a very strong memory. I also remember seeing somebody sit closer than we are now, in this busy, frenetic atmosphere. I remember seeing her just sitting, and the impact that had on me, that she could take time out and just be. And that was more important than all of this chaos that was going on around. And I asked her, I was quite a new nurse, quite newly qualified. And
how old were you, do you think?
I started at, say, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22, 23, 24, that sort of
age range. Yeah.
So I thought I was grown up, but looking back, I wasn't. And she told me, I'm going to go work at St. Christopher's, that's a hospice. I thought, interesting. And then I thought, there must be a better way of doing this. There must be a better way. So they were the formative experiences. I didn't set up and think, I'm going to be a palliative care nurse. That wasn't a career trajectory as such. But I suppose if you delve into it, if you delve into the caring, if you delve into the really caring for a person as a whole, I suppose it's not really that surprising. It was a natural fallout.
Amazing. And at that time, were you just a general nurse?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you feel fulfillment in that?
Yeah, I liked what I was doing. It was hard, really, really hard work. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Really tough work, but good fun.
And do you think it was mentally a lot to take on?
The responsibility. So the responsibility is immense and mentally really difficult. You know, it's life and death.
100%. Yeah.
Literally.
I just can't. That's just so much pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
How were you able to separate like your personal life and your work life?
To a degree. Did it come home with you? Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's really hard to separate. I think you make very close friendships because other people know what you're going through. But it's tough. It's tough to separate. I think you have to keep well, but it's very hard to do it.
Well, because you're human, and so much of what you're witnessing every day is the realities of being human.
Absolutely.
Which is a scary thing to face. And up to that point, at the age like 22, 23, 24, had you ever lost a patient before?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable sharing that moment?
So it wouldn't have been unusual for somebody to have, and I'm going to use the word died as well. So lost has got a whole new connotation as well. So this comes back to you. You said that you weren't comfortable using the word dying when you were smaller as well. And so a lot of the work that I do now is about communication, is about language. So I'm going to sort of challenge you and raise you and say it wasn't losing patients, because sometimes I did lose patients when they wandered off.
Yeah.
The psychiatric patients.
Sometimes they actually did lose.
I lost.
That's actually such a good point, because doctors have to say died. Otherwise they don't.
Yeah.
There's too much miscommunication in that.
Yeah.
So the first time your patient died.
Yeah. I can't remember my first patient that died. That probably sounds heartless. I hope it doesn't sound heartless.
No. I'm sure you've had thousands of patients.
I don't remember. I do remember different situations. And I remember being horrendously sad. I remember going above and beyond what I should do. So I remember looking after a daughter, whose mum had died. And she died suddenly of an acute cardiac event. And she was devastated, absolutely devastated. And I can share it now because it was so many years down the line. But I remember thinking that she needs help, she needs support. And there was no formal grief, there was no formal support for families or relatives. And probably very stupidly, I went round to see her literally and had a cup of tea. And I thought, this isn't perhaps wise. I shouldn't. I remember writing to a friend and saying, this is the address that I'm going to. I should be back in an hour and a half. If I'm not, this is where I've gone.
Yeah. Keep me safe.
I don't recommend doing that to anybody. But I just thought, that had you need caring for. Somebody needs to check in on you, make sure you're okay. You might want to edit that bit out.
Well, no, I think it's interesting that you did that, because it's so telling of what you ended up doing in the future. Like, you wanted to make sure the people left behind would be okay, and you also wanted to make sure that the people that were dying were going to do so in a way that everything would be okay.
You asked about dying, but some of the things that had a major impact on me when I was training was birth.
Oh, okay.
And there was a short period of time that I thought I wanted to be a midwife.
Okay.
And the two have got such close parallels that it's so obvious when you jump into it. And I was really passionate about midwifery. I loved that part of the training. And I learnt so much from the mothers. I learnt so much from the women giving birth. And I can vividly remember the woman that had the most impact on me was a woman who basically told us all to go away.
Yeah.
Go away.
Yeah.
Leave me alone. It was her fourth child. She got on all fours.
Yeah.
She knew what her body was doing. She trusted herself. She had her baby.
Amazing.
And the impact on that was respect for her body. Yes. So I developed such respect for our bodies. Our bodies know what to do. Our bodies know how to have a baby. Our bodies know how to die.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you interfere with both of those processes, I witness, the more you interfere, the process itself can go off kilter.
Mm-hmm.
The more we trust our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
things are often, if you trust your body and you listen, your body knows what to do.
That's really cool. That's interesting that you say that, because I have a strange fascination with birth myself. And there's just so many, like the cascade of intervention.
Absolutely.
And this
Absolutely.
idea that the second you get in there and do something, it's can be potentially downhill from there.
I'm really pleased that you said that.
Yeah.
Really pleased. I love that cascade of intervention. It's absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm.
And you can draw those same parallels with the cascade of intervention of dying as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe we can talk about that later as well.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
these natural processes, if we interfere, and of course there will always be times, and I'm not going to paint a rose-tinted picture, there will be times that we have to.
Of course.
Of course we have to interfere. But both events are life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
Both events have significant impact on a family, the person.
Mm-hmm.
Both should be done so if you ask most people would like to die at home. A lot of people, given the choice, might like to give birth at home. I had both of my children at home, my first and my second.
Oh my gosh.
Both should be done with dignity, with people you love.
Mm-hmm.
They should be as pain-free as possible.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of parallels. A lot of parallels.
Mm-hmm. And I always find it hard to connect my thoughts sometimes when I'm like going back into it's like Elliot says that I say amazing too much or cool too much, so I'm trying to not say that. But I'd love for you to take us to, because your first job in palliative care was in a hospice, correct?
Correct.
So tell me, do you remember that first kind of chunk of your time there?
Yeah.
What was it like?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned earlier that it was growing. It was a really exciting time because it was growing as a medical speciality. It was just starting to get recognised as a speciality. So when I went to my first hospice, I didn't have hospice training as such. It was very much learn, and they didn't want you with hospice training. They wanted to mould you, to shape you, to teach you, to grow. So I remember going to a hospice, and it, potentially a bit corny, but it did feel like coming home. It did feel like you were delivering the best care possible in the best way. And it's really strange because people time after time after time would come in and be amazed because it wasn't often a sad place. It was happy.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was crazy. It was barking mad at times.
Yeah.
The cakes were fantastic. There's always good cakes in the hospice. So I remember it with tremendous fondness. I remember the friendships that were made. I still remember families. We're going back to 1992-ish, I want to say, a long, long while ago. I can remember so many of the families still. I felt like coming home.
Did any of the people who were dying express fear to you?
Yes.
And how'd you deal with that?
It's hard to answer how I dealt with it then because I'm probably overlaying how I would deal with it now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's always about understanding what the fear is. So if you can find out what somebody's afraid of, somebody like Catherine Mannix is the best role model that you can go to for something like this, but finding out what somebody's actually afraid of. Is it the fear of pain? Okay, we can address that.
Yeah.
Is it the fear of a mum who hasn't prepared a daughter for her 18th, for her 21st, for her wedding, for when she has a baby? Okay, let's address that. So how I would like to hope and I would like to think, but I bet I didn't have the skill right early on. But it's always about addressing what is that fear, because it's never that wide funnel of a fear of death. Is it a spiritual or religious fear? Because somebody's frightened they're being punished or something. So it's too broad a word to say fear. If you understand what the fear is, you can then address it.
And do you think, because I'm just thinking for our listeners who may, we always see the people that have a fear of blood and are fearful of going into the nursing sphere or into the doctor, whatever the medical interest is. Do you think that same idea can be applied to other areas of life? That if we look at the fear from what is the core root of it, we can overcome it.
Absolutely, 100%. I think that's a great analogy to make.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you understand something, you gain a sense of control.
Absolutely.
Fear is also a feeling of a lack of control.
Mm-hmm.
I should have mentioned earlier, I'm probably a control freak as well. Quite a control freak. And if you understand what's happening, if you feel you have autonomy, you're in charge of your own decision making in whatever area, and you can apply it to anything, I would guess, couldn't you? Making a podcast, you don't know what to do maybe at the first. Find out how to do it and approach those fears. It's a great analogy.
And yeah, that's just, I feel like working in a hospice, from what you've said, it's almost about caring for the whole human.
Absolutely.
Rather than just this thing. Like over the years, I've visited people in hospices, and it's weird. It doesn't feel like a scary place.
That's interesting.
And I've spoken to other people who worked in a child hospice, and I approached her with, isn't it super sad? And isn't it a horrible place to be? And she's like, no, it's literally the happiest place on earth, because the care is so attuned to what the child wants and needs. And it's almost like the dying part is forgotten in a way. Yeah. It's more like a transition. Yeah. Which is, what do you believe comes after?
Oh, that's a big one, isn't it?
I know.
I've seen so many people die, and had the huge privilege of seeing so many people die as well. And it's very hard to think that there isn't more to a person than this. I don't have a faith as such, but there is. I have a spirituality. I do have a spirituality, and I think there is more than just these cells that make us up. Where that goes, what happens to that, what is the essence of you, I don't know. But I hope we live on somehow.
So you're working at this hospice. You are there for how many years, approximately?
So I am there until I get pregnant.
Oh,
because you've got to picture the scene. This is quite a new concept in care. They're attracting people and training people up. So the demographic is women. Predominantly women, quite young women. So we went through a spate. We all tended to get pregnant.
Oh goodness!
Bosh. So I worked there for about 3 years until I had my first baby.
Lovely. And then you took a break?
So then I took a break, and I took time off to have my children, my first child. And then I went back part-time.
Wonderful. And I recall you had another child?
I did.
Yes.
And it was at that point that I then went to work at a different hospice. So I knew that the hospice was what I wanted to do. Yeah. At that point, there was a big shift. So when I had children, the shift was that, children became my complete priority.
100%, yeah.
And I had to do a job that I could be a mum as well. So I often talk about this with the children now. So I ended up doing night duty.
Oh man,
which was
difficult.
Which enabled me, because I breastfed my children until about 18 months. It was quite a long time. So that was something that I did. So I had to have a job that I could
be there,
not been away too long.
Yeah.
They were ghastly nights. So you'd be up all day, you'd be a mum all day, you'd look after the children. Then you'd go to work. I remember walking through the door of reception, and somebody said, "Oh, you're always happy." And I felt like saying, "I am not happy. I am so exhausted,
so tired. This is fake.
I'm so tired. This is all fake."
Yeah,
but you have to be.
Yeah.
So you'd be up all day, you'd be up all night, you'd take the kids back to school, you'd snatch 3, 4, 5 hours kit, you go back and you do it again.
Oh my gosh,
it was exhausting.
Do you think that you compartmentalize? Like, how were you able to maintain that happy demeanor?
You just have to. Because if you were going to be cared for, it's my responsibility. I'm a professional. You don't need me turning up and
with
looking
all
after
my
you
stuff,
or your family, and saying, "Look, I feel rotten today." You just don't need that. You're going through one of the worst times of your life. I've got to be on my A game. So it was tough, but it was part time, so you couldn't do that 7 nights on the trot like you did before children.
Oh no,
you'd survive for 2 nights.
Oh my gosh!
And then you'd recover. Then you'd do it again.
And at that time, what did your children think that you did? Did you tell them that you were?
Yeah.
And how did you approach that conversation?
So the children always knew, and they'd come in and out of the hospice as well. So I tried to be open and honest with the children about death and dying. And it's had very different impacts on them as they've grown up. And I'm sure my daughter won't mind me sharing. So as I became more senior, so I started doing what they call on call. So I achieved promotion. I've done lots of external studying. So I used to take on call. So people in the community would ring if there was a problem. And you'd either give advice or you'd pass on if you couldn't deal with it. So some on call you would be in the hospice, and then some on call you'd be at home. And I think people think on call you're sitting in an office waiting for that call, but you're not. You're in bed. Your phone's by the bed.
Yeah.
So my children were very conscious that there were crises happening in other people's life, and sometimes I'd be getting up at 3 a.m, I'd be out of the house, and it had a more detrimental effect on my daughter, I would say. It hasn't made her comfortable with death and dying. So I'd love to sit here and say, yeah, we're all open, we're all honest. It was tough, I think. It was really tough. It had an impact on me. It certainly had an impact on my daughter.
That's interesting how, like, some people who are surrounded like that by death and dying, as you were as a child, it can make you immerse yourself in that. And then for your daughter, it was a completely different scenario.
It was more scary for my daughter.
Yeah.
That they laugh now, so whenever we have a conversation, there's an eye roll, and they say, "Oh, it always circles back round to that, doesn't it?"
Yeah.
If you watch a film, if you talk about the news, if you talk about this, it circles round.
It does.
But that's life. It just is. You can't pretend it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think it's refreshing to hear from someone who doesn't have that fear of it, and is so. I'm lost for the word that I'm supposed to be saying right now, but it's just so matter of fact about it, which is interesting. And so you've had your children, you're working part-time. At what point did we go back to school? How did we make that transition? Because I'm very curious about this.
So there were subtle shifts. There were subtle shifts. So as the children get older, I was able to then focus back on my career again. So I was able to do various forms of study, just little by little by little. And when the children were older, so I had them when I was, 24, I had my son.
Oh my gosh, I'd have a child right now.
So it was a good 10 years. So I'd gained a lot of experience in hospice care. I'd worked in the community, I'd worked in the hospice as well. I then... And there's a long career to cover as well, but I'd also gone to a hospital. So I'd focused on the hospice, small organisation. And I remember them saying one day, "Oh, the palliative care team in the hospital are really short. Can you go to the hospital?" And I remember thinking, "Oh God, I'm a hospice nurse. I'm special. I don't do hospital." I'm meandering slightly, but I will come back.
No, don't worry.
So I thought, yeah, I'm special. I'm a special hospice nurse.
Yes.
So I went to the hospital, where the palliative care team was employed by the hospice, but worked in the hospital just to help out. And I think there was transformative for me. So I realised that most people will not die in a hospice. Most people will die in an acute hospital. The numbers are shifting slightly post-COVID, but so many people will die in a hospital. And why should they not get that outstanding level of care? Why should it just be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% of people that get hospice care? That's wrong. And it wasn't until I went to the hospital that I had that epiphany.
Interesting.
And I realised you could influence so much more. You could influence at scale, because in the hospice you're really preaching to the converted. So those hard conversations had been had.
I see.
That shift in care had been had.
And by hard conversations, do you mean the shift to palliative versus curative care? Yeah.
And we can maybe explore that, because that's such a good point. So yes. So in the acute hospital, I remember driving home, and the only way I can describe it is being at the epicentre of a bomb, day after day after day after day. And you would sometimes be called to break bad news. You'd be breaking bad news. So you would sit with people at that point that you use the word curative. So the focus was no longer on curative treatment. It was on palliative, i.e. symptom control. I have a huge frustration now because so much of me thinks that so little has changed. So I'd like to sit here and say it's all wonderful, how much has been achieved. But I've got a situation at the moment where somebody has a long-term illness. They're in hospital now. They're asking for palliative care because the person they love is weak, losing weight, bedbound. They've got a long-term condition. And they've gone to the team to say, can we have palliative care? Can we help support? Can we get good care? And their response has been, no, they're not ready yet. And it's like, ah!
Oh my gosh.
So I've gone terribly off tangent. I'm sorry, but it's...
No.
It all sort of ties in, so it's that frustration. Sorry, I've conversation hopped dreadfully. So I've gone to the hospital. I'm learning really broadly about palliative care in a generalist environment. That feistiness I spoke about earlier in our conversation, that was when I became super feisty as a nurse. So I wasn't wearing a nurse's uniform at that point. I would go to work in a suit and boots, suited and booted, because you were challenging healthcare professional decision making all the time. And people were too scared to tell families and relatives that their loved one was sick enough to die. This person is dying. Until sometimes 24, 48 hours before.
And then it's shock.
It's too late.
Yeah.
It's too late. And you can probably see, you can see me getting angry now. And to a degree, we're still battling that now. We're not recognising end of life early enough. So all around about this time, I'd gone to a hospital in 2016. So eventually I'm asking your question. And it was at that point that I had the tremendous privilege of applying to do my MSc. So you've got a picture of the scene. I'm doing my MSc. I'm learning how to study. I'm at university. I'm working in the hospital. I've got one child doing their GCSE O levels and another child doing their A levels, all mulched in the same time.
Oh my gosh.
It took me 5 years to do the 8 modules that required, the research module. It took me a long while.
And that's a master's in science.
A master's degree in specialist nursing in palliative care. Yeah, that's shocking. I can't remember the title.
I think I have
specialist in palliative care. You're going to have to tell me what it's in.
I think I have it here.
That's shocking. What's the proper
You
title?
spent 5 years. Come on.
I'd spent 5 years doing it. I can remember all the modules now.
Let's see.
Can you remind me what I've done?
I don't know if I have it here. We have moments that spark career change at 50. Completed an MSc in advanced and specialist care with a focus on palliative care. That's what you got.
Excellent. Excellent.
Fabulous. So I think like it's interesting to hear, like as a person who's 25, listening to that, I'm like, oh my God, how did you manage all that? Do you think like when you get to that point in life, you just do it?
Sheer bloody determination.
Yep. Just determination get you through.
If you've got a goal, if you want it, you go for it.
Yeah.
If you want it, you go for it, and you go through the different barriers that there are to get there. And I wanted it. I really, really wanted it, and I love doing it. It was a real privilege to study at that age.
Yeah,
real privilege.
I think you come at it with a much better perspective. Yeah. Like even just going to university at the age of 18 and like studying like you did, like there's moments when you don't care. You don't give a shit. You know, I didn't do the best in university. Like I just scraped through to get into my program that was for teaching. And I think that if I had done it now, it would have been a completely different experience.
Yeah.
So it's cool that you have that perspective later in life of being able to do this.
It was fantastic.
And what did that award you? Like after you did that, what was kind of the goal? Was the goal just to get that education, or was there something bigger that you had in mind?
In all honesty, there wasn't a specific goal at that point. I wanted that education. It was fantastic. And I was very mindful that if I was applying for more senior jobs, I knew that if I didn't have that, that would be a barrier to my potential future career as well.
Yes.
So I didn't have necessarily a career. This is what I was going to do. It was just I was mindful that as I was progressing through, as I was becoming more senior, they call it banding in nursing. You have bands that you work your way through.
Yes.
So I was very mindful that at the next level of banding, I wanted to be as good as I could. I wanted to be authentic, and I would also need it to be able to get through and to improve my career.
Amazing. And what year did you finish up your education?
Oh gosh, that's really shocking because I can't remember without looking.
So you started in 2016.
So would have been after 2016, 2018-ish, 1920, about that.
Were you, because I'm just curious about COVID.
Oh, no, way before.
Way before that. Okay.
Way.
Yeah, so you've gotten your MSc. Where are we now? We've got your master's in science. Where are we now?
We've got our master's in science. We're working in an acute hospital. During this stage, I also sort of, whenever there was an opportunity, I took it. So I've got lots of different hats that I wear, lots of different things. So I was working in an acute hospital. I shared with you how frustrated I was about the way that generalists approach palliative care, and I thought there's got to be a better way. And there's a system called the Gold Standards Framework, GSF.
Yes.
And they'd been really busy in primary care in GP land. And they were developing their programme. So that was bringing basic palliative care, recognising that last year of life to generalists. So I really liked the ethos of the organisation. And they were just branching out into secondary care, into acute hospitals.
Oh, okay.
So I had my MSc. I'd had many years of hospice care. I had lots of years of end-of-life, palliative care. And, of course, the acute experience as well. So it just seemed like a match made in heaven for a short period of time. And the job was so, so exciting. So I applied for the job, which was a real wrench, real wrench. Because I'd worked through so many different stages at that last hospice, community, hospice, hospital. So I went to work in Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
So a long way from home. So I worked for the Gold Standards Framework, a week in Shrewsbury, a week from home, and then we travelled around for 2 weeks each month. So we go to different hospitals, delivering the training programme or doing assessing or auditing. So a really exciting time of life.
And so were you home for like a week, a month at that time?
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a huge changeover from what you were used to, I'm assuming.
Huge changeover. And it sort of maps, I've always maps to the children obviously leaving for uni.
Yeah.
So it not enabled me. They didn't stop me doing anything, but I chose then
to make that jump.
So yeah, so I did that. I only did that for a short amount of time. I did that for 6 months while they were integrating that programme. So that was interesting.
At this point, you were there for 6 months. And then you moved on to another acute hospital at that time?
I did, yeah.
Wonderful. Then from my notes here, you were working for a community trust.
That's right.
And then COVID hit.
Yes.
Take me through that.
Gosh, that's a big take through to do, isn't it? It's
I
almost
know.
deep breath time. So to put it into context, it is a large community healthcare trust.
Okay.
So there were 10 community hospitals associated with that, multiple community teams as well. So a vast organisation. There was my manager had not long left. So there was basically me as end of life care representative across this organisation.
Oh my gosh.
Which was really interesting. The emotions at that time were just so difficult to process. Huge. And I'm mindful for people listening that it's a really difficult reflection, and it might be difficult for people to hear as well. There was guilt. There was fear. So there was just me being end of life care representative, or sort of challenging information and channeling information. But then that was fighting with being a nurse as well. And I couldn't put uniform on because if I went down, that role had gone. But yet I felt guilty. Yet I knew my children, my family could be at risk if all those conflicting feelings. I remember the sleep would just went out. It was a really difficult time.
And at that time, you were providing guidance to the nurses in the 10 hospitals?
Providing support, providing guidance, hearing the guidance that was coming through from the government, trying to interpret that. The rules were changing as well. The way people were dying was different during COVID. And I don't want to explore it too much, but the way people died was different to what we'd been used to. People died differently. So symptom control had to be different. The way we managed people that were dying had to be different. We've picked up on how holistic palliative care is, the touch, the communication, the being with. Now the challenges for that with the uniform, with PPE, the guilt, because the nurses on the ground, they were doing the work day in, day out. I wasn't doing it. So my job was to support them. There were lots of programs in place for people that they could call, helplines, guidance that were put in place, but they didn't want that. They needed to speak to a person. So it was very much generating training, delivering support, and not just giving them a helpline number. People needed to share and be heard and be respected for what they were doing. An incredibly proud part of the work was bringing together, and I don't want to say the area that I work for as well, so I'm mindful, but
yeah, of course.
So there were lots of organisations across a large patch, lots of multiple hospices, multiple hospitals, multiple consultants, multiple teams, and I've always been a really good networker. I've loved networking. And I remember sort of being quite pivotal in bringing teams together, so that we had one way of caring for people, that we had training that was delivered across organisations. I've missed out a bit of my career, actually. I did work for a small amount for a CCG. That was just a short part of my career.
And CCG?
A clinical commissioning group, as it was then, before the ICB's integrated care boards were developed. So policy was taken at government and then delivered out and worked out at that level. So I'd made lots of connections all throughout all of these different experiences. So I'm incredibly proud, because I knew so many people. I'm quite nosy, I'm quite a good networker. So we're bringing together training. So it was the one time that there's no competitiveness among organisations. We just delivered education at scale to all the different hospices, to all the different nurses. It didn't matter which team you worked in. So I was part of that, and that was a tremendously proud experience.
And did you ever feel... did you feel like that's where you belonged, or did you feel like you belonged in that nursing position? Were you happy to be in the teaching role?
Do you mean the physical hands-on? It was conflicted. Yeah, I felt I should be doing. I felt guilty because I wasn't in uniform and I wasn't doing. I did feel guilty. Did I ever feel relieved? Yeah. And that's really a human thing to say. Did I feel relieved? It wasn't at times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I felt guilty because I felt relieved. Yeah, it was tough.
There's just so much emotion that would have gone through that, because while you're doing this amazing thing by allowing this education to be, and in some terms you're supporting more people by that role, but yet you still are feeling this inner conflict almost. With what, do you think it came down, do you think the guilt was because was like external, or do you think it was an internal thing about what you should be? Yeah.
Nobody made me feel guilty. Nobody made me feel guilty, but I felt guilty because there's the word, nursing means so many different things, and traditionally, it's a uniform and it's this, but it is so much more than that. And you'd say that you're a nurse and people think, you're doing all that amazing stuff, and I think, but I'm not. I'm not doing that. I'm just supporting the people that are doing it. So it was internal. Nobody ever made me feel that I wasn't a proper nurse or I wasn't doing a valuable job, but I felt it.
And how did you deal with that?
Badly. Am I supposed to sit on a podcast and say, these are the strategies?
No. I think it's life. Like, how do you mean badly?
Badly. Difficult to sleep. I made a conscious decision not to drink during COVID. because I thought this could be really dangerous, because you could think at the end of a long day, I'm going to have a little drink. I made a really conscious decision not to have alcohol. So I think for quite a long period, about 10 months, I didn't drink at all, which was good. I'm a bit of an exercise freak. So I exercised every day. Exercise sometimes to extreme as well, so I love running. I developed, I'm going to give a shout out to a running gang.
Oh, yes.
So people that we met online through Twitter, we'd support each other running.
Oh, nice.
Some incredible people that hopefully will be listening to this when you release it. So we developed that. So that was, we supported each other running, but there was more to it than that. We supported, through difficult, dark days as well.
That's amazing. That's cool. You said that it was badly. Those all sound like good things to support yourself.
Yeah, no, they were good things. We were lucky as a family. My daughter was teaching, so she was still working. My husband was still working, so we were privileged. We had house, we had space, we had enough. So our experience was okay.
In the grand scheme of things,
we were lucky.
And then 2021, you decide to start a business.
I did. Oh, there was a parallel as well. There's another really significant event around about that time, and during COVID.
Yes, when you were caring for someone, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, it was a really close family member, and he had an acute event. So we could see he was becoming frail. I've written this up actually. I wrote it it was published because it was quite an interesting experience. He was becoming very frail, and he had an acute event. And then there was a decision to be made. He could have gone to hospital, or he could have stayed at home. And I remember they rang, and I went over, and whether it's a female role or nursing role, whatever, and I spoke to him. We made decisions about what to do. What do you want? Because I was a nurse. I went over, and there was a 2-hour discussion with the ambulance crew.
Oh, man.
What are we going to do? And they said, we're going to take you to hospital, and if you want, we can bring you back again. Now, I'd known enough in hospital that as soon as you take an elderly, sick, frail person to hospital, you started talking about the cascade of intervention.
Yes.
So they'd ignored all their symptoms for months, weeks, potentially years. When somebody is so sick and frail, you get to a point where you can't reverse symptoms, and it was very clear and obvious that he was very, very sick and very, very poorly. And what was a priority to that person wasn't being in hospital. It wasn't finding out what was wrong with them, because they hadn't wanted to do that for all the prior months. It was being with the person that they'd been with for nearly 60 years. So we bounced around these ideas. What do you want? What matters most to you? Which is the essence of good care. What matters most to you? And it wasn't finding out what was wrong. It wasn't being separated. It was remaining at home. So we made the decision as a family. And then I stepped back into nursing role. Moved in with them for a week whilst I got everything set up. We got everything set up, and then cared for them. And it was a really, really amazing, privileged time as a family to care for somebody who's dying at home, to be on the other side of it, to be doing it. Yeah.
And that was your first experience was that your first experience with someone like close to you in terms of family dying?
My nan had died when I was 14.
Okay.
And my gran had died as well. But it was the first time that I'd nursed somebody who I knew. Yeah. And it was easy. Not easy. Oh, gosh, that came out wrong. I was able to transition from my role in the family.
Yes.
Unbelievably with ease to the role of a nurse. Literally overnight.
Wow.
And to go from having one status or one role, one position as a family member, and you don't do intimate care, you don't do things like that.
Exactly.
You don't see bits and pieces.
Yes.
And then to move with care and comfort and ease, literally
overnight,
with no challenge, with no difficulty in anybody's part, was an incredible privilege. Incredible privilege. And then once the care package was sorted out, once all the bits were in place, and that was really hard to do and very difficult for me.
And what do you mean by care package?
So getting other people to come in and do personal care.
I see.
And it was really frustrating because I had to fight If I give you an example, so the person developed a sore area that needed a district nurse to come and help.
Yes.
And you have to fight, and you're on the phone, and you have to make a referral.
Oh.
And I remember eventually getting through to the district nurse and thinking, oh, thank goodness we've got somebody on side now.
Yes.
So they come in and they deal with that little tiny problem.
Yes.
And then discharge you. And you think, hang on a minute, this whole system that I've been working in is just crazy. You'd have to be re-referred to get that bit dealt with again.
And was that something you weren't able to do? Or what was... Yeah, I'm curious, like, as a nurse yourself, is that something that you would be doing for them? Or is that something that you have to call another person in?
That's a good question. So you sort of need you need a team around you. When somebody's dying, you need more than one person to do things.
Yes.
You also need district nurses in to do their element of care.
I see.
There were specific dressings that I needed as well that I didn't have access to.
I see. So it's just like in a hospice, you need a team of people.
You need a team. You need no one person can manage. You do need a team. So there was a frustration that the system should be better. Our system is crap, and that made me angry and frustrated.
And it probably caused, the whole emphasis on palliative care is to make sure they're comfortable and happy, and that was probably a huge thing that prevented it.
Yeah, it was difficult as well, and you think people didn't work together as a team. Another example is you have to be seen by a doctor within X amount of days of dying. So if you haven't been seen by a doctor within 28 days of a death, the death has to go to a coroner.
Okay.
So good practice is that you are seen. It used to be 2 weeks, but these were one of the changes that you had to be aware of during COVID. So rather than 2 weeks, it was 28 days. And I remember ringing up the GP saying, you haven't seen this person for over 28 days. I can see that they're deteriorating. I don't think we're going to get through this weekend. I suggest you come and do a visit, or please could you come and do a visit? I remember thinking, this is so wrong. The reason I'm doing this is because I know to do it. And what would happen if it was you?
Yeah, exactly.
Elliot.
Yeah.
Our system ought to be such that we know what to do for somebody in this situation, and we didn't. So I felt frustration.
And as someone who would have no idea what to do in that scenario,
It's wrong.
It seems like you're just constantly fighting for something that is inevitably going to happen.
I feel I'm still fighting. I feel I'm fighting and fighting and fighting for the most basic things. I still feel I'm fighting.
And when your family member eventually died, what were the feelings surrounding that in terms of your perspective as their nurse?
Can I say it was wonderful?
Yeah. Why was it wonderful?
Because they died in their own bed. They died with the closest members of their family very, very nearby. I hope they died pain-free. The last 2 nights I'd gone back and I'd stayed with them because I could see that time was becoming very short. They died looking at all the family photos opposite them. Yeah. So we'd printed all photos of all the grandchildren, of the children and all the family, and we put them opposite. I'd done a very good shave.
Oh, nice.
And they wanted everything done, so they were pointing. So they were in charge.
Yeah, of course.
So that,
they wanted to look lovely.
They wanted to look good.
Yeah.
And I made sure that, so it was a good death. It was a good death.
Yeah. Speechless.
Yeah.
Speechless.
Coming back to the birth, it was with people they knew. It was with dignity. It was with people that loved them. And I hope it was pain-free as well. So those parallels that we spoke about earlier.
It's so evident that the beginning of life, which is inevitable, and the end of life,
we can't change it.
You can't change it, but you can change how it's treated, which is, it's just a really important thing to discuss.
Definitely.
So after this point, you lost your loved one. Or
My loved one died.
Your loved one died. Sorry. It's so weird not to say lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Your loved one died. This sparked what? What did this spark in you?
So lots of things run sort of parallel to life as well, don't they? So during the last few years that I was working as in the NHS, I was very mindful about advanced care planning. So something called advanced care planning is simply thinking about things in the future. So this had always been running through and rumbling through.
What point did that start? Do you remember?
No, because there wasn't a specific point.
It was just always in your mind.
It was about all the things that we've spoken about, if we think about it and plan earlier, that end point is better.
100, yeah.
And then seeing that time after time. So in the acute hospital, we'd go to things called mortality reviews. When you'd reflect upon the death, did it go well? Did it not go well? What could we have done better? And hearing time and time again, when was dying recognised? 24 hours before?
Not enough.
Not enough.
Yeah.
Not good enough. So my whole layer upon layer upon layer has been building advanced care planning. I realised that everywhere I went, I was doing the same type of job. So I was having to almost start from scratch at every organisation I went to. I was explaining advanced care planning. I was saying the same messages again and again. Things like lasting power of attorney weren't done. People didn't understand it. And I remember thinking, I could do that. I could do that.
And for those who don't know what that is?
Lasting power of attorney is a way of you nominating somebody legally to support you to make decisions or make decisions on your behalf if you can't. So if you're, for example, married, or a son and daughter, or mum and dad, people think that your next of kin can automatically make decisions for you if you lose capacity. But you can only do that through nominating somebody through a lasting power of attorney. If you've got a joint bank account, people think, I don't need a lasting power of attorney because we've got a joint bank account. But you can only run a joint bank account with both of you having capacity.
I see.
If one person loses capacity, you lose the ability to consent to run the account together.
I see.
So setting up a lasting power of attorney enables you to manage your loved one's affairs.
And at what point is it too late to do that?
Once you've lost capacity.
And by capacity, what does that mean?
Okay, so that's a really big question. You could do a whole...
I know, that's a whole other thing.
Brave one. So very briefly, capacity is decision specific and time specific as well. So you may have this capacity to decide whether you drink water, whether you drink orange juice, whether you drink milk, and what clothes you wear.
Yes.
But you may not have capacity to decide whether you should sell £100,000 worth of shares or not, or sell your house.
I see.
You have to understand the decision that's being made. You have to be able to communicate it. You have to weigh up the pros and cons. Was it worth me driving the way down to Brighton to chat to you today? Yes, it was. Can I communicate that to you? Yes, I can. So they're all elements of capacity, and you have to fulfill all of those things to have capacity. But it isn't a binary. You don't have it,
or you don't,
or you don't have it.
Yeah.
It's decision and time specific.
Okay. And so you said, I could do that. So how would you facilitate that?
So this is bringing us to
where we are today.
So it brings us to where we are today. So the whole job has been advanced care planning. The whole job has been palliative and end-of-life care. The whole job has been recognising that we do it too late. One of that element is creating a lasting power of attorney. So rumbling alongside that had been COVID. Rumbling alongside that had been caring for somebody who was dying, a close family member. And then rumbling alongside that is children getting older and older as well. So the perfect storm was created, if you want to call it that. And I was brave enough then to set up my own business. So I started off simply doing lasting power of attorney.
Yes.
So I set up as a limited company and thought, let me learn about doing that as a private business.
Yeah.
Whilst I was still employed. So you had a little bit of a safety net. And then after, I can't remember how many months, I resigned, and then I developed and grew my own business. And lasting power of attorney is just one element now of what I do.
And I'm just thinking, like, from a business perspective, how did you make that jump? Like, you kind of had that little backup where you were still working at your other job, but how did you just have the courage to do that?
By being bold.
Yeah.
By taking a really deep breath and thinking, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah.
And the practical element is the children they didn't need me financially at all. So, and I'm really happy to admit that I was privileged enough to think, well, if this goes wrong, I've got a roof over my head. And I know there will be people listening thinking, I was lucky to be able to do that. So I didn't need to worry about that element. So that fear of failure. I didn't have the threat of losing my home or losing. So that obviously helped. But basically it was taking a huge leap of faith. And I've done more learning, Hannah, in the past 4 years, I would say. I've grown, I've learned, I've developed so much, and I'm learning every day still through the business.
Yeah, because it's something that I feel like you can't prepare for.
No.
There's so many things in life that you just have to do it.
Yeah.
And it's the only way forward. And I'm wondering, when you started this limited company, did that require a financial investment for yourself? No, so it was just a idea that came through.
Yeah. But did it require a financial investment? Yes, to a degree. Because everything you set up has to have money behind it, but not a huge investment that you think of as in thousands and thousands.
Yeah.
But yes, all the website domain, all the employing people to support you, all the insurance, all of that, yes, that requires money, a degree of money. But it goes in dribs and drabs. It's not a sudden chunk that you've got to get a massive loan for. It requires money, but not that huge investment.
And how did you get your first client? How did you get word out there?
Oh, it's scary, isn't it?
Yeah. How did you because even now, when people ask me, I don't know if you've had a similar experience, but when people ask you what you do you say you're a business owner?
No.
Why?
So I answer differently depending on who's answering me, because the business has developed into 3 very different tranches, 3 very different arrows. And I still find the elevator pitch really difficult to say. So I will answer what I think is most relevant to that person.
Of course. You're trying to find clients. How did you go about that? So, what were your first things?
Well, very first of all, so I was doing lasting power of attorney. And I'd done it for mum and dad. I'd done it for myself. So I knew how to do it. But I hadn't streamlined the process into a sensible business way of doing it. And you could do it by paper, you can do it online. So I'll be really honest, the learning curve was like that. I had to learn how to set up all the different accounts, how I was going to run it, and then how I wanted to run it as well. So I set up a website, and I spent a lot of time thinking about my mission, my value. So I ran myself, taking all the experience, everything I'd learned throughout my career. I ran my business like that as well. But this time it was me choosing.
Yeah.
Because the NHS is very hierarchical. It's very patriarchal, hierarchical. You have to follow the line sometimes. I remember I mentioned that I published that article.
Yes.
I was a really senior nurse at that time, really senior. And I remember it had to go to the chief nurse before I sent it into the editor. And I'm thinking, this is potty. I'm 40 plus years old.
Yeah.
I'm writing something that's going to be reviewed. It's going to go to an editor. You don't need to be checking
my work.
You don't need to be checking my work.
Come on, I know what I'm doing.
I know what I'm doing. So having that freedom and flexibility has been fantastic. So I remember writing, starting to blog, and I wrote, if I can't be me, it's not for me. So all the values that I've had throughout my career, I've then now focused in how I run my business.
Amazing. And take us through the different facets of your business, and then we'll explore the podcast in a moment.
Okey-dokey.
Yeah. So
it does, I mentioned it had different elements to it. So one thing that I do, I'm a shocking guest because I've got so many hats that I wear. I've just remembered something. I'm also, along that long career path that I've done as well, I've also taken on an inspecting role.
Okay.
So I work for something occasionally called the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, as a specialist advisor. So if they were to inspect a hospital, I can provide an expert view on end-of-life and palliative care.
Oh,
so they call you in when they need you.
Yeah.
So that was another little
tidbit that you do.
And that's really interesting, because if you're being inspected, it's really good to know how it works on the other side. So
100%.
It's really good collecting all this knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I thought I can help organisations. So one tranche of my business is helping organisations improve. So I can do a deep dive on organisations. I can interview the teams. I can look at their systems. I can look at their audits, their policies.
And is that specifically organisations in the medical field or any organisation?
It is medical. Okay. And it's specifically for end-of-life and palliative care as well. Yes. So be it a hospital, be it an acute trust. I can do a deep dive and do some service improvement work with them as well. So that's one tranche of what I do.
Yes.
Another element of the work, probably that I enjoy, if I'm allowed to have a favourite, is education.
Yes.
I love education, teaching and education. I thrive on it. So people pay me to deliver education. I'm not a brilliant businesswoman in some ways.
I beg to differ.
So I deliver a lot of stuff for free. A huge amount of what I do is for free. I deliver education once a month for free. And it's really unusual, Hannah, because people turn up to the education that are hospital consultants, ITU consultants, and members of the public, side by side. And I've never done that before.
Yeah.
And because it's my gig, it's my game, I do subjects like CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. When does it save a life and when does it spoil a death?
Oh,
Really
wow.
sexy title.
Yeah, I really like that. No, I like
Good
it.
And you'd think,
catchy.
You'd think you shouldn't have these people in a room because they're completely different audiences. And it's really bold, and I was a bit scared the first time I did it. But these are conversations that we need to have as a society rather than make a wall between us.
100%.
And it works brilliantly.
Yeah.
So I talk about advanced care planning. I talk about lasting power of attorney. I talk about care in the last year of life. And it's for anybody that wants to come and listen. So I do those for free monthly.
Very cool. And is that in person, online?
Online. But I also get paid to deliver them for organisations as well, because I have to fund the free stuff somehow.
Of course, yeah.
So I do teaching, and they can be huge teaching packages or an hour teaching. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they are. So that I do that element. I do bespoke advanced care planning. So people come to me quite often with... I could make this story up, but it applies to person after person. I've noticed my mum has become increasingly weak. I don't think she's got much longer to live. The hospitals say that she's absolutely fine. This matters to us. What do we do next? So I support people through that.
Okay.
I work with people that I would call well, that just want to do advanced care planning. People in their potentially the 30s or 40s that want plans in place. I do that. And then I also continue, I've really grown and developed the lasting power of attorney business as well. So the strapline is all of that work. I try to improve professional understanding, raise public awareness, and normalise conversations about advanced care planning. That's the elevator pitch.
Amazing. So I don't know what to say. It's so something I've never thought about, but it's so important. And I think the fact that you're attracting people in their 30s and 40s is a testament to how much you're impacting people.
I hope so.
Have people come to you and just express gratitude?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that the best thing in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
More is when I've influenced nurses, I think, or people. So there's been quite a few times that people have come to me after years down the line. I've had people come and say, I'm a sister at a hospice now because I remember being a student nurse when you were at the acute trust.
Oh my gosh.
And not that long ago, somebody was in touch with me for my last job, actually. And they were going through the apprenticeship route as a nurse. And they remember going to a teaching session that I delivered about death and dying, end of life care. Yeah. And they said because of that, they now are specialising that in the community. So that means everything. That's change at scale that I want to do. A legacy.
An amazing one at that. And the last thing I'd like to explore is your wonderful podcast, because you're doing all this work within the UK and within medical environments kind of surrounding you. But this podcast, there's endless reach that this could have. So I would love for you to tell us about the person who inspired the podcast. Okay.
That's a tremendous honour, actually. So the person that inspired the podcast is another Clare, Clare Fisher.
Yes.
Clare was at a very young age when she was diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer. She was working abroad at the time. So she went from being a fit and well woman literally overnight into a dying lady.
Jeez.
No preparation, no planning. Another feisty Clare. Clare had 3 children.
And she was quite young.
She was quite young. She was in her 30s.
Oh, God.
And she made it what she called her retirement project to normalise conversations about death and dying, to do advanced care planning, and to introduce hospice care earlier in the disease trajectory as well. So all the things that I'd been talking about, all the things that I passionately believed in, Clare was living. Clare was living that. So we connected through Twitter. Twitter is fantastic. And And Clare did some teaching for me. So she presented at an education programme that I delivered for the nurses in the Community Trust during Dying Matters Awareness Week. And she was so feisty, Hannah, that she said, well, if I'm not well enough to do it at the time, I'll record it for you and you can show them the record. She was that fragile.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But tough. So
it mattered so much to her.
It mattered so much to her. So an incredible woman. She was facing dying full on. She was talking publicly about it. She developed a website. Fantastic. And then I noticed on Twitter that she was becoming more poorly. And she ended up in intensive care ITU. And she was tweeting from ITU. She didn't want to be there. You know, she was telling the doctors that she was dying. And what mattered to her, what mattered most, that conversation that we're having again, was being at home. She had twins. I think it was the twins' birthday as well.
Oh, God.
And she wanted to be at home for Christmas. So we'd connected through Twitter. She'd done some work. And we'd also done some work together as well for the What Works Centre for Wellbeing. So I said, Claire, I feel a podcast coming on. Literally like that.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm sitting here surrounded by your incredible podcast kit. I'm in awe of your kit.
Oh.
So I'm going to take you back to imagine doing a podcast on a mobile phone with somebody that's really, really poorly, whose time is very, very limited, not having a clue. Me, not her.
Yeah.
So
not having a clue about what?
How to podcast.
Ah, yes.
What do I do?
Not a clue.
Not
Just
a clue.
have a chat.
Have a chat. So we spoke. And I hope it's a really good episode. So we spoke about how she was. We spoke about the importance of planning and then how to get your plans heard to try and give other people support as well. It was a really good episode. I hope not too sad, but it's about, even though she'd made all these plans, she found herself where she didn't want to be. So we spoke about that. We pulled it apart, and Claire did die in a hospice with her family. She had the death that she wanted. It was quite complex. So we started talking about, these are important conversations about important conversations. And all through the strands, you've been leading me through my career. There was so much that I haven't told you, all the networking that I've made along the way, the incredible people that I've had the privilege to know. And the fact that nobody gets advanced care planning. They think it's one way of doing it on one form. I thought, I'm going to make a podcast about all the different elements of advanced care planning.
Absolutely.
So Claire was the first one.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can do another one.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll do another one.
I'll do another one.
I'll do another one. So 100 episodes down the line now.
Amazing.
So each episode talks about a different element of advanced care planning. And it's to say that it isn't one thing. I have certain questions that I ask every guest. And I try and explain what it is, normalise it, and show people what to do as well. So I can give you some examples of some of the episodes that we drill down into specific issues. But yeah, they've been phenomenal.
And what's some of the questions you ask?
So each guest gets asked. So I may have somebody that's a real high fly from somewhere around the world.
Yes.
But I always turn the tables on my guests as well. So
Yeah.
I ask them, what have you done for your own advanced care planning?
Ah. And do you find that people have? Like, that are
Not
in the
always.
medical care? Yeah.
No.
Even
No.
though it's funny, like, even though you're interviewing these people that have the knowledge of the importance of advanced care planning,
They don't know what to do.
they don't always do it.
But then I track them. So I said, do you want me to follow you up? And so they said, I'm going to do this. So I said, okay, I'll check in with you in 6 months' time.
And have they accomplished it?
So I've got a diary. In my diary,
Yeah.
I make a note and I go back to them and say, have you done that? You said you're going to do your LPO or your will or this or that.
Yeah.
But they've been so good to explore. And now I get people coming to say, can I be on it? So
Oh, that's amazing.
things like a lady, her daughter had a organ donor talk at 14 at school.
Oh, man.
So she signed up to be on the organ donor register
At 14.
at 14 and died unexpectedly at 17.
Oh, God.
And this lady approached me and she said, can we tell Fee's story? And I can share her name because this is public.
Yeah.
So I had the privilege of interviewing the mum of somebody whose daughter had died, and she wanted to share her story.
Wow.
And so that episode was all about organ donation, because that's one element of advanced care planning.
Absolutely.
I've looked after loads of patients that say, I'd like to donate my body to medical science, but not understood what it meant and almost said it as a joke. So I thought, okay. I did an episode on finding out how you donate your body for medical education. I interviewed the incredible Dr. Catherine Mannix,
Yes.
not Dr. Naheed Dasani from Canada,
Oh, yes.
about homelessness.
Wow. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So people experiencing homelessness, or Dr. Naheed Dasani, I hope I get this right, will die, I think men 42, women 43. So he argues that palliative care that experiencing homelessness is a palliative care diagnosis. And he set up the most incredible program called the Peach Program. So, yeah, I interviewed him as well. So, really diverse. And 100 episodes on, it isn't one form, it was one thing. It's all of these things that we can think about now.
And do you find that, like, as you've done the 100 episodes, could you have imagined there was so much diversity in this?
No.
And it's just with every day you're learning something.
Yes.
Like you said, you're constantly learning something.
I'm constantly learning something. And it's been fantastic. The past few years has been fantastic. I've learnt more now about advanced care planning through asking people, through delving into the Mental Capacity Act, through going to the Court of Protection. Yeah, I've learnt so much, and I hope I'm sharing that. You
absolutely are. And I feel like we could talk about this podcast and what you do for ages. And I think, you know, who knows what the future will hold for us and stuff. But I would love to end on our final question, which is, actually, do I have two? How much more time? 5 minutes? 2 last questions is, what are your future plans for this business?
My future plans are to grow the education side of my business and to become the leading national figure for delivering advanced care planning education.
Amazing. That is, I love that you have that so specific. And I really can't wait to see where you go. That's really amazing. And my last question is, for the people out there who are listening who perhaps are looking to go down the medical route, perhaps looking to do a career change, what advice do you have for them?
Follow your passion. Do what makes you happy. Work because you enjoy it if you can. Be brave, be bold, and don't be shy to ask questions. Learn as you go.
Thank you so much, Claire, for coming on today. Before we finish up, if you'd like to just tell us where we can find you.
Okay.
Give us all those details.
So you can access my website at www.speakforme.co.uk. If you go there, if you go to the resource section, you'll find the podcasts that I do. I blog every fortnight as well. So every time I learn something, I blog a fortnight.
Lovely.
I turn up for that blog every single fortnight. You can also access the education that I deliver. If you're interested in receiving or talking about an education package, you can get me through the contact me button there as well.
Fabulous.
And on Twitter,
yes.
Clare Fuller 17. So Clare Fuller 17 on Twitter.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for coming on today, and we'll hopefully speak again soon. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and leave a comment or rating, as it really helps us grow. You'll find any relevant resources in the description below, including details about our guest, links to anything we mention, and our application if you'd like to be a guest on Seasoned Professional. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being a part of our community, and I cannot wait to see you next week. Bye-bye.